Number 6. Hatshepsut. When Thutmose II died around 1479 BC, the throne of Egypt passed to his son, a child too young to rule. His stepmother, Hatshepsut, stepped in as regent. 7 years later, she did something that had no precedent in Egyptian history and would not be repeated for over 3,000 years. She declared herself pharaoh, not queen, not regent. Pharaoh with the full titulary, the double crown, the crook and flail, the false beard strapped to her chin in public ceremonies, and her image carved onto temple walls in the masculine regalia of kingship. She ruled Egypt for approximately 22 years. Under her reign, Egypt ran trade expeditions to the land of Punt that returned with living myrrh trees, exotic animals, and quantities of gold and incense that funded a building program still visible at Deir el-Bahri today. Her mortuary temple there is considered by architects and historians to be one of the most sophisticated structures of the ancient world, its terraced colonnades integrating into the natural cliff face behind it with a precision that later Egyptian pharaohs never matched. She was, by almost every measurable standard, one of the most successful rulers Egypt ever produced. And then, approximately 20 years after her death, someone decided she had never existed. Thutmose III, the boy she had sidelined, waited until late in his own reign and then launched a systematic campaign to remove her from the historical record. Her statues were smashed and buried. Her cartouches were chiseled from temple walls and replaced with the names of Thutmose I, Thutmose II, or Thutmose III. Her image in temple reliefs was cut away or plastered over. Her name was removed from the official king lists that Egyptian priests used to track the lineage of pharaohs. Across dozens of monuments, the evidence of her 22-year reign was methodically, physically destroyed. The campaign very nearly worked. For centuries, Egyptologists reconstructing the king list found an inexplicable gap in the 18th dynasty. It was only in 1903, when Egyptologist Howard Carter, later famous for finding Tutankhamun's tomb, identified her distinctive cartouche beneath the plaster covering a temple relief, that the erasure began to unravel. The irony is absolute. The campaign to destroy her image preserved her. The smashed statues were buried rather than removed, and the pits that held them kept them intact through 3,000 years of Egyptian history. Because her name was removed from the king lists, she was unknown to tomb robbers who stripped the monuments of pharaohs whose names they recognized. Her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri stands today more complete than those of most of the rulers who tried to erase her. She almost disappeared. The attempt to make her disappear is why she did not. Number 5. Akhenaten. Around 1350 BC, the pharaoh Amenhotep IV made a decision that the entire religious establishment of Egypt had spent its existence preventing. He declared that every god in the Egyptian pantheon, the thousands of deities whose cults had been maintained, whose temples had been staffed, whose priests had accumulated wealth and political power across centuries, was false. There was one god, the sun disk, called Aten, and the pharaoh was Aten's sole representative on earth, the only intermediary through which ordinary Egyptians could access the divine. He changed his name to Akhenaten, meaning beneficial to Aten. He moved the capital from Thebes, where the powerful priesthood of Amun controlled religious life, to a new city he built from nothing in the desert, at a place now called Amarna. He stripped the Amun priesthood of their income, their temples, and their institutional existence. He sent workers throughout Egypt to chisel the name of Amun from every surface where it appeared, including, in some cases, the name of his own father, Amenhotep, which contained the Amun component. His new city was built in less than a decade. Akhenaten ruled from it for approximately 17 years, producing art of a style that broke every Egyptian convention: realistic, emotionally immediate, showing the pharaoh with his family and domestic scenes that no Egyptian ruler had ever permitted to be depicted publicly. When he died, the reversal was total and immediate. His successor, almost certainly his son, who would become Tutankhamun, abandoned Amarna within 3 years. The court returned to Thebes. The Amun priesthood was restored. And then, With the methodical thoroughness that Egyptian institutional power could bring to bear, Akhenaten was erased. His name was removed from king lists. His city was dismantled, its stone blocks reused in the foundations of later temples. His statues were destroyed. The distinctive art style he had promoted was abandoned overnight. His name became a taboo. Later Egyptian records refer to him only as the criminal of Amarna or the rebel, never by name. It very nearly worked. When European archaeologists began excavating the Amarna site in the 1880s, they found a city frozen in the moment of its abandonment. Official documents still in their offices, artwork still in their studios, a royal city preserved by the same erasure campaign that was supposed to destroy it. Nobody had looted Amarna because nobody knew it was there. Akhenaten had been so thoroughly removed from the record that his city was simply not known to exist. He invented monotheism, changed the art style of an entire civilization, and built a capital city from nothing. And for over 3,000 years, he was so completely erased that he did not appear in any account of ancient Egypt. Number 4. Thutmose III. The man who erased Hatshepsut was himself one of the greatest military commanders in ancient history, a fact he was at considerable pains to ensure would be remembered correctly. Thutmose III conducted 17 military campaigns in 20 years, extending Egyptian control into the Levant, Syria, and Nubia to a degree not achieved before or after. His battle at Megiddo, around 1457 BC, is the first battle in recorded history for which a detailed tactical account survives, and it has been studied by military historians ever since as an example of strategic decision-making. He was called the Napoleon of ancient Egypt by the 19th century Egyptologist James Henry Breasted, a comparison that understates the case since Napoleon's empire lasted 15 years, while Thutmose's lasted 3 decades. But the historical record he left was not simply documentation, it was construction. Thutmose III's court analyst Chinuni recorded the Megiddo campaign and subsequent military operations in extraordinary detailed troop movements, logistics, diplomatic communications, spoils lists at a level of specificity that later Pharaohs' records do not approach. This detail serves a function. It makes the campaigns verifiable to a degree that makes the overall record credible. And within that credible framework, Thutmose inserted what he needed. The king lists he commissioned assigned his reign as the direct successor to his father, Thutmose II, skipping Hatshepsut's 22 years entirely. The official record of Egyptian military achievement began from his grandfather Thutmose I, building a narrative of military dynasty in which his own campaigns were the culmination. The priests who maintained his mortuary cult were specifically tasked with ensuring his name was celebrated and his lineage presented correctly, meaning without Hatshepsut. He built more than any previous pharaoh. He erected obelisks throughout Egypt, many of which were later taken to Rome, Constantinople, and other cities where they still stand today. He expanded Karnak to a scale that made it the largest religious complex in the ancient world. He won 17 consecutive military campaigns and never lost one. And at the end of his reign, in the final years of his life, he turned to the one task that his military record could not accomplish, making sure the woman who had ruled before him did not share his legacy. He almost succeeded. The world remembered Thutmose III and forgot Hatshepsut for 3,000 years, almost. Number 3. Ramesses II. At this point in the video, if these pharaohs are changing how you think about what history actually is, subscribe. There are 3 more, and they get worse. In 1274 BC, Ramesses II led the Egyptian army into the worst military situation an Egyptian force had encountered in generations. The Battle of Kadesh, fought against the Hittite Empire under King Muwatalli II, was supposed to be a decisive Egyptian victory that would settle control of Syria. Instead, Ramesses walked into a Hittite trap. His lead division was ambushed, routed, and effectively destroyed. Ramesses himself, according to the most charitable reading of the Egyptian sources, rallied his personal guard and held the position long enough for reinforcements to arrive. The battle ended with both sides withdrawing. Kadesh remained in Hittite hands. Egypt gained nothing. What happened next is the most spectacular propaganda operation in ancient history. Ramesses commissioned accounts of the battle, a poem, and an official report called the Bulletin that were inscribed on the walls of every major temple in Egypt: Luxor, Karnak, Abydos, Abu Simbel, and the Ramesseum. These accounts describe a different battle entirely. In the Egyptian version, Ramesses single-handedly charges the entire Hittite army, routs them, and wins a decisive personal victory. The gods themselves intervene on his behalf. The Hittite king is so humiliated that he sends a letter begging for peace. The inscriptions were consistent across every temple. The repetition was the mechanism. If the same account appears on every major religious monument in the country, it becomes indistinguishable from established fact to anyone who encounters it without access to alternative sources. Alternative sources existed. The Hittites kept their own records. When Hittite cuneiform tablets were translated in the early 20th century, they described a different battle, entirely one in which the Hittites considered the outcome a draw at worst and a tactical Hittite victory at best, given that Kadesh remained under their control. Ramesses was not describing what happened at Kadesh. He was replacing what happened at Kadesh with what he needed it to have been. And for 2,000 years, it worked. Historians reading the Egyptian temple inscriptions accepted the account of a great Egyptian victory. It was only when the Hittite archives were opened that the propaganda became visible. He controlled the temples. He controlled the scribes. He controlled the monuments. He controlled history, until someone found the other side's paperwork. Number 2. Pepi II. Pepi II became Pharaoh of Egypt at approximately 6 years of age. He ruled for approximately 94 years, the longest reign of any monarch in recorded history. By the end of it, Egypt's old kingdom had collapsed. The connection is not coincidental. Pepi II's reign began around 2278 BC. In its early decades, Egypt was the most powerful and administratively sophisticated state in the known world. The pyramid complex at Giza had been completed within living memory. The agricultural output of the Nile Valley was feeding a population that had not existed a century earlier. The pharaonic state was at the peak of its organizational capacity. By the end of Pepi II's reign, the central government had effectively ceased to function. Regional governors, the nomarchs, had accumulated so much inherited wealth and independent power that they no longer needed or recognized central authority. The administrative infrastructure that made Egypt function had been distributed outward from the center to the periphery over the course of one king's 94-year reign, and the center could no longer recall it. What makes Pepi II's case remarkable is what he was doing while this was happening. The administrative records of his reign show a pharaoh continuing to issue decrees, conduct ceremonies, and maintain the rituals of central power long after central power had become nominal. The royal court continued to function as if it was governing a unified state, while the unified state was dissolving around it. His court's records do not record the collapse. They record a functioning administration. The reality and the record diverged across decades, and the record maintained its fiction of competent governance right up to the moment the first intermediate period began, and the state genuinely fragmented. Pepi II did not cause the collapse of the Old Kingdom through malice or incompetence. He caused it through longevity, outliving every institutional framework that could have managed the succession problem his endless reign created, and allowing power to drift outward because no mechanism existed to pull it back. But the record he left describes a successful pharaoh. The collapse is visible only in the silence that follows in the decade of fragmentary records and competing claimants that succeeds his reign. He outlived his empire, and the records he left did not notice. Number 1. Seti I. In a room in Seti I's mortuary temple at Abydos, there is a list carved into the wall. The Abydos king list records the names of 76 pharaohs in chronological sequence, from the first king of unified Egypt through to Seti I himself. It was carved around 1279 BC as a monument to pharaonic continuity, a visual demonstration that the ruler standing before this list was the legitimate heir to an unbroken line of divine kingship. Stretching back to the moment Egypt became a state, 76 names. and notable absences that tell a more revealing story than the names present. The Abydos king list omits every pharaoh of the Hyksos period, the centuries when Egypt was ruled by foreign invaders from the Levant. It omits Hatshepsut. It omits Akhenaten, his successors, Smenkhkare and Neferneferutin, and Tutankhamun. It omits the entire Amarna period, as if 17 years of Egyptian history simply did not occur. What Seti I did at Abydos was not record Egyptian history. He curated it, selecting which pharaohs would receive the ritual offerings that maintained their memory in the afterlife, and which would be denied that maintenance and allowed to disappear. Under Egyptian theological belief, a name that was not spoken, not inscribed, not maintained through ritual, was a name that ceased to exist in any meaningful sense. The Abydos king list was not a historical document. It was a theological weapon, capable of retroactively destroying the existence of anyone left off it. Seti I used it to construct a version of pharaonic history in which the legitimate line of divine kingship ran straight from the mythological first pharaoh to himself, with every inconvenient ruler the foreign occupiers, the female pharaoh, the heretic edited out. The list was accepted as historical fact for centuries. When Egyptologists first translated it in the 19th century, the missing pharaohs were genuinely unknown. The gaps in the king list appeared to be gaps in history, rather than gaps in the editor's political convenience. The Abydos king list shaped how Western scholarship understood Egyptian history for generations. Every pharaoh Seti left off had to be rediscovered from other sources: temple reliefs, administrative records, foreign archives, the contents of tombs that had been sealed before the erasure campaigns began. Seti I was not the most powerful pharaoh Egypt produced. He was not the longest reigning, not the most militarily successful, not the most architecturally ambitious. But he produced a document so authoritative in its apparent completeness, so elegant in its visual demonstration of dynastic continuity, that it successfully shaped what later civilizations believed about the Egyptian past. He didn't just write history, he decided who got to have one. 6 pharaohs, 6 different methods of rewriting reality. Hatshepsut erased by a stepson who could not tolerate what she represented. Akhenaten erased by an institution that could not tolerate what he believed. Thutmose III erasing his predecessor while meticulously constructing his own legend. Ramesses replacing a military failure with a fictional victory on the walls of every temple in Egypt. Pepi II maintaining the fiction of functioning government while his empire dissolved. Seti I producing a king list so authoritative that it determined who counted as having existed at all. The methods are different. The goal is the same. History is not what happened. History is what survived. And what survived is not an accident. It is the outcome of decisions made by people who understood that controlling the record was the most durable form of power ever invented. Every one of these pharaohs almost got away with it. Some of them did.